Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be breaking down some players to watch at the Senior Bowl on both the national and American rosters as the action finally kicks off today in Mobile. Just got in town last night, drove all the way from Jacksonville, so been pretty tired since then. Got a lot of sleep though, so we're up early and ready to go out there and watch some of these players. I hope to get you guys maybe some YouTube shorts for the first time on the channel, just breaking down some of the things we find out. We'll see if we'll have daily videos on what's happened. I know at least we're gonna have a recap video, hopefully Thursday night, maybe some live streams. We'll see how that all goes. But in this video, I do want to talk about some of the players to watch, when you're gonna be able to watch them, maybe how they'd fit in Jacksonville, and then some of the storylines so far. I know there's one I want to touch on for sure. So let's go ahead and let's jump right into this. So in Mobile, Central Time Zone right now, just for understanding of when these things are taking place. For you guys, it's Eastern. For most of you guys, because you're from Jacksonville. The national team is going to be the first to kick off practices today. They will begin at 10:30 Eastern. So from time right now, it's 3 hours out for me. And then the American team is going to follow them up at 1 p.m. Eastern. So each team is going to have about 2 hours of practicing. And so it's going to be a long day out there each time. Probably about 4 hours overall, maybe five. And then people will go through interviews. Unfortunately, I do not have access to do interviews this year. Maybe in the future, if I go back, we'll be able to do that at that point. But we'll still be able to watch them up and close and learn a lot about these players. So, nevertheless, let's jump into the rosters. So, we're going to start off with the national team here. So, quarterbacks, out of the two, this is probably the most loaded of them all because you got Bo Nix and Michael Penix both on the national team, which is pretty exciting. I am thrilled to get to watch both those guys, although it won't be the focus for me because we're trying to watch players who could come to Jacksonville, maybe have an impact. And so that's really going to limit us to probably the receivers, the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and cornerbacks primarily. And you could throw out other things too if you want, but those are the big needs. That's where you're really seeing a lot of the conversation. So, I'm not going to watch too close, but I will still be excited to see some of these guys. Huge fan of Michael Penix myself, so really cool to get to see him in person today. But at receiver, you've got some interesting names for the national team. Maybe not a ton of like first round talent, but it's really the case for the American team as well. You've got some guys who could sneak up there and really be good picks like early on day two. So some names that stand out to me, I think guys who are probably best from this group, probably Devontae Walker. Didn't get to play a whole lot this year at North Carolina because of trying to get eligible with the team. A lot of shenanigans off the field that was out of his control. And then you got Brennan Rice behind him, son of Jerry Rice. Really good build at receiver. I think he's like 6'3", 210. And he could be kind of a sneaky prospect that gets lost in the mix right now. Those would be guys I'm primarily watching. Some fun ones, guys who I think have the ability to really skyrocket after this, would be Malaki Corley, who basically has the build of a running back. I think he came in at like 215, like 5'10" roughly. We can actually figure it out on here. He should be. This isn't all updated right now, but I've got some things going on here. Yeah, 5'10" and a half, 215 pounds. So very much looks like a running back. Um, However, like if you watch film on him, this is the guy who his ability to break tackles and create yards after catch is unparalleled by I think any player we've seen coming into the draft before. He's very much a unique guy in that aspect, and if you go watch the highlights, you're gonna fall in love with this guy. But problem is, primarily played in the slot a lot, no experience outside for the most part, and the route tree is very limited. But that is more of a coaching thing. You can coach up guys on route trees as long as you have a good staff in place. Javon Baker might be a favorite as well coming out of Florida from UFC or UCF. um, he's got that X receiver kind of build, sort of wasn't really talked about before the last few weeks, but kind of coming out of nowhere. And he's got some exciting athleticism to his game. I'm not as well versed with him, but he'll be a name I'm going to watch really close today, so I can get introduced to kind of his game. And then Ricky Pearsall is another guy from Florida who had a lot of production with them this season. He's probably their top receiver on the team. He'll be someone to watch. And then you got some other exciting names. Luke McCaffrey, Roman Wilson, kind of in that day 3 range right now, but could be something there with both of them. So very much watching receivers from the national team. And I think you look at all the rosters in general, there is a lot of depth at on both of these teams at all these positions. There's some that are a little stronger, but you're going to have to watch everything. And so talking about one of the stronger classes here, one of the stronger groups is going to be the national team offensive line. He got a ton of huge names in here. Cooper Beebe, he played a long time in college, but he has just been steady as they go. Really good player. One of those guys that if you draft him what you're getting. You're getting a very good football player, maybe not elite, but just very, very good. And he should absolutely be in consideration for Jacksonville because he can really do whatever you ask out of him. And he's a bigger guy. He's going to bring physicality to the game. Like, this would be a player that would be very happy coming in Jacksonville. And it's really just a conversation about what's the right range. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you could very well say that he should be the guy at 48. Like, that's very possible. However, I think realistically another player will be sitting there that might be a little more valuable, but he's very much in that range, and he might deserve to go higher because I think he gets overlooked because everything's good. There's not like the exciting, crazy, out of this world aspects to his game, but he's just consistently good. Other guys here, Troy Fatanu, one of the meanest punches in the game from an offensive lineman. Very much in the first round consideration, probably towards the back end. But he's someone I'm watching for Jacksonville, especially in a trade back scenario. Could end up playing guard in the NFL as well. Same with Talise Fuaga, although I think he's going to go higher. He probably deserves to. And he might be another guy who transitions to guard because his measurables are a little below average at tackle, so you could get a really mean guard out of him. He would be a great fit if they're looking for someone to replace Brandon Scherf this offseason. So he's going to be another name that we're watching really close. Jordan Morgan out of Arizona, he's had some injuries, but he's got a lot of exciting aspects to his game. Kind of not necessarily the biggest of the big, but I think he's got really good size for being in an offense that moves people around. There are some questions about that, but he's another player like I'm gonna have to watch a bit more because I am not too well versed in his film at this point, and so this is a good opportunity for that. Same with Dominic Puny, as far as the film and really watching him. Not someone that I have really watched at all, but he's been talked about a bit in the day 2 range, and so he's someone I'm gonna keep my eye on. And finally, Jackson Powers Johnson, huge name there. I think he could be an absolute star at the NFL level. Limited experience, maybe, at center, and then even some at right guard. I think he played 400 snaps there. But when he did, he was phenomenal. And for the limited amount of time he's played the position, there's not really a whole learning curve to worry about there. So you got to ask yourself, how much better is he going to get if this is how good he's doing already? So very much an exciting name. It's just a question of the experience. And then you got a couple more names. Sua Mataya is someone I really didn't like too much going in. I don't think he'd be a great fit for Jacksonville personally. And nevertheless, we'll watch him. We'll see if maybe there's something there. But he's kind of talked about as another day 2 guy. So lots of offensive linemen for the national class. Defensive line, one big name here, one very big name, and then you've got a lot of guys in that late day 2, early day 3 range. The big name is obviously Leatu Latu. I think if you didn't have the injuries, this guy should be a top 5 pick easily in the draft. I think he's one of the best pass rushers that we've seen coming out of this past 5-10 years. He should very much be in that conversation with all these other guys. I mean, I think like with Will Anderson, with Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, I think he's that kind of player. I think he's that good. But it's a question of injuries because you got a similar player who came into the NFL where he was told he couldn't continue playing. I think he even played for UCLA as well. That's Jalen Phillips, who went to the Miami Dolphins, and he ended up getting hurt this last season, huge injury, and so there's questions about when he's going to be able to play next. And they kind of knew about that before, and so he fell down the board. But he's a very good player. Leatu Latu is, I think he's a better player, but kind of similar. Same school, told he couldn't continue playing, came back and played. I think he's played 2 years healthy, so it's risky, but there's an immense reward because you may go get him at 17, if you're Jacksonville, and then get a guy who's one of the top 5 players in the class, and everyone's punching themselves asking, why did we not get this guy? So, very much a name to watch, really see where he falls, but a very hard evaluation because as fans, as scouts, we do not know the details. We do not know how much of a risk this injury is, if it's something that was misdiagnosed or if it's legitimate. That's just out of our control to know. The teams will, though. As far as other guys here, Adisa Isaac, I think would be a really nice addition to the defensive line. Just talking about getting a very good rotational guy in, I think that's a direction you absolutely got to consider going. But I think he probably goes before you're comfortable picking that, unless you want to go after it, maybe second round at 48. I think that might be a hard decision, though. And for all we know, might not have the pick. We got to see what happens still with Calvin Ridley. So he's another name I'm definitely watching, though, because he could fall. Because, well, he's just a very steady, good player. It's kind of like Cooper Beebe, where there's not a ton that like blows me out of the water, but I know he's good, and so he might end up falling in the draft. And then you got some other guys who kind of fall later. I think in the early day 3 window, late day 2, those would be like Michael Hall Jr., bit undersized but really good defensive tackle. Brandon Dorlus from Oregon played all over the defensive line for them. So it's a question of where he's going to play in the NFL or if you keep him in that role. And then Tyler Davis, bigger guy from Clemson, really good penetrating the pocket, doing all that, but some injury concerns with him. And so these guys kind of fall later, but they're players that very much going to watch for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then finally, for the national team, you got some good defensive backs here. And this is a position we definitely got to watch now because, well, Trent Baalke went out and said, oh, well, you guys are crazy. You're talking about how it's going to all switch to man. It might not. You don't know anything. Well, even if it doesn't, the goal in the offseason is to make your team closer to what the personnel wants. And so you're adjusting the roster for what Ryan Nielsen wants. And in the regular season, Ryan Nielsen is adjusting his coaching and the way he plans to the roster he has. So this is the part of the season, or the whole year, where the roster's changing to fit what he does. And so I think you very much consider some corners who do really well at man. So Kyrie Jackson, kind of a same thing as some of those last guys we talked about, late day 2, early day 3. A lot of potential there, though. Good man coverage cornerback, just kind of came out of nowhere in this season. So he's someone I'm going to watch close. I have not got a ton of film on him yet, but he's definitely in my sights. Kalen King, he was looked at as a bona fide top 10 pick before this year, and just didn't play that well, struggled against Marvin Harrison Jr., all went downhill at that point. But this is a guy who might be a steal in the draft just because of that. I mean, it could just be a phase, and he could be a great player, but it reminds me a lot about Keely Ringo, where he was revered as like this top 10 guy, and then all of a sudden, things kind of fell off for him, and all these people had issues with the way he plays, and he just ended up falling in the draft to the fourth round because of all that. So it could be a similar projection, although I don't think it'll be to that exact same level. Um, and then you got a lot of other names here too. Max Melton might be a later pick to watch. Chow Smith Wade would be a potential slot corner later in the draft. Quinion Mitchell is a name we didn't really talk about a lot for Jacksonville, but might need to be added to the conversations because of how much man coverage he runs. I believe it's mostly off man coverage. I would have to double check that. I know he ran specifically one kind of coverage quite a bit, so we're going to hopefully see him doing a lot more stuff out the Senior Bowl this year and kind of proving that he can do it all. So that'd be one of the last names I watch, but he's very much in that round one consideration right now because of how incredibly he played for Toledo. I think the big thing that turned people on to him was a 4 interception performance back in 2022. So not that that's everything, but he has performed very well for them. And it's a question of, you're coming from Toledo, you ran one kind of coverage most of the time. Can you perform against better competition, and can you do all this other stuff? And I think that he can. But we'll see if he's a guy who's the best pick in the first round, because that's more my question with him. So that is your national roster. We're going to take a look at the American team. So quarterbacks, maybe not as exciting, but still got some guys you can watch. Joe Milton, really strong arm. That's the big thing with him. A big quarterback. He's going to be someone to keep your eye on. Michael Pratt is another name that people like. Could be kind of a sneaky pick. People are comping him to Brock Purdy right now. I don't know about that. If you're comping him to that, that's a huge projection because Brock Purdy just took his team to the Super Bowl. Of course, lots of fighting over that, right? Like who actually caused that? Was it Brock or was it the team around him, or maybe, crazy to say, just both? But he's definitely someone to watch. Spencer Rattler, definitely an exciting name. Someone who was seen as a bona fide first round pick a few years back. Kind of fell off and then it's been regathering his stock since then. I think done pretty well for South Carolina. So definitely names to watch there. And then getting into receiver. So this is one of the interesting storylines to me. So Xavier Legette, probably out of this group, the top guy. There's other people too that you could try to argue. I think Glad McConkey would be the one that people would argue over him because of just how consistently reliable he is as a player. But Legette came in yesterday at the Senior Bowl, which would be the 29th of January. And he was supposed to be 6'3", I think, 227. And you can see on here, he came in at 6'1", 2 inches shorter. Weight's about the same. That's fine. You know what other player also came in like that people went crazy about and said, oh, we got to drop him down our boards because he's not what we thought he was? This was Rashee Rice. Guy who went to Kansas City this year, second round. Now, Kansas City still drafted him around where he was expected to go before, but they got a really good receiver out of that. They got one of the best ones in the draft. So I think it'll be interesting to see how people respond this year. If they do the same thing, Legette drops way down the board, or if you see them have Legette stay where he is, knowing that last year this really didn't have as much of an impact as what we thought, because Rashee Rice has still found plenty of NFL success. He's just not 6'2". He's 6 foot. Too bad, so sad. So very much an interesting one to me, just because of the similarities there, not in necessarily the way the guys play the game, but coming in 2 inches shorter. than expected. People panicking about it, saying, "Oh, is this guy really what we think he is?" And he's still the fastest guy at the receiver position, arguably. So I think it's fine, but we'll see what people do and how they react to that. And maybe he's the guy who falls in the draft because of it. Now, Lad McConkey, I will be honest, I have not watched a ton of him because I see him as a slot receiver, and I don't see him as an outside, and I don't see him having a role in Jacksonville if he was drafted by them. Um, but he's a player that people are getting pretty high on. They feel like it's just going to be consistently reliable, and so he'll be someone I finally get to watch, but probably not the top of my focus for those reasons. Jamari Thrash will be an interesting watch. He's kind of one of those late day 2, early day 3 guys that could be solid for Jacksonville. I'm not blown away by his game, but I think he could be a good investment around that point. It's just a question of like, do you want to invest in a guy who's okay, or do you want to go out and get someone who's great, and give up more draft capital, or do you want to pigeonhole yourself to that? And I don't think you necessarily have to, but that would be my question with it. And then finally, you got Johnny Wilson, who I think he came in at 6'6" yesterday, so not as tall as expected because he was expected at 6'7". But this is a guy with a tight end build through and through, and I think you'll probably see him get put at tight end quite a bit during the Senior Bowl. So probably not someone I'm watching too close unless he just blows me away, because I felt like watching his film, like there's a lot of exciting intangibles for him, with his size and everything like that. But I didn't think he was a player who really blew me away. I just see him as a guy who's exciting to look at, but maybe on the field as a player doesn't have the impact that you envision. So we'll see if that gets changed. I will note tight ends here because I think Jaheim Bell is an exciting tight end with a lot of upside. I don't think he's someone Jacksonville looks at, but he is someone who will probably be exciting to watch. And then Ben Sinnott, he's obviously not going to be a top pick for you, right? But that's because you don't need tight end that bad. I think he's someone that day 3, if he's sitting there, is a player you end up taking. I think he can do very similar stuff to Brenton Strange, except he brings in a lot more physicality. I think he could line up as a fullback a little bit more. It's just a question of the ceiling not being as high. And so it's not a top priority, but when you're getting into day 3 and you're just trying to find players who you can find a role for and guys that, maybe could start for you, like he would be on my list of players that I would bring in because I do think it's possible. Like he could end up having a role on an offense. He could end up having a bit of an impact. He fights like hell when he gets the ball. It's like George Kittle at that point, but it's just there's just things missing from his game, and so he might be someone who is better than expected in the NFL. But I think he's an exciting player, someone I liked pretty early in the process. Now, offensive line. We'll go through this list. Guys I'm specifically watching, I'll be watching more than this, but some of the top people. I think Javon Foster is definitely one. Maybe not a name you hear a lot, but when I watched this film, I found a player that I thought was really good. I think needs a little bit of development, but has everything there to be a good offensive tackle in the NFL. I think this would be a great investment for Jacksonville if they want to get that replacement for Walker Little after this next season and potentially have a starter down the road. I just think he's someone who could be really exciting in that way. If you want to comp him to another player, not necessarily based off size, but just kind of my outlook on him and him being a potential starter with some time, I think it's kind of like Wanya Morris last year, where we talked about potentially investing in that and then having him maybe end up being a starter at some point if you develop him well. And Foster's very much the same to me. I think he has really high upside. He'd be a great day 3 pick for Jacksonville. Then you got Tyler Guyton. Very interesting here because if you followed the bulky burner gate crap on Twitter with him actually posting stuff on a burner account. This was one of the guys that he said he liked and wanted the Jaguars to draft. He floated the idea out there like he has with all these other players that Jacksonville got. So we could maybe say this now. This might end up being the pick. I would not like it at 17. They'd have to trade back pretty far for me to be okay with it. But Guyton is a very exciting prospect because of how well he did with the limited time he played. Not great, but good. Did fine. He's a right tackle. He's from Oklahoma. You got Anton Harrison, who just came out of there last year. You want to move him to left at some point. If you go get Guyton, you got your bookends, and you got him from a place that has been very successful in developing offensive tackles. Doug Pearson got Lane Johnson out of there when he was with the Eagles. So there's a lot of reason to see how it could work. But I think it's a very risky pick nonetheless, and one I'd be more comfortable with, early in the second round perhaps. So Guyton, very much a guy to watch. Crazy size as well. I think he came in. Let's see what his size was. He came in at 6'7", just over that, 328 pounds. So really big size, great fit for Jacksonville. It's just a question of the value there because you do got a player you got to develop quite a bit and didn't really start a whole lot until pretty much this last year. So he's a name to watch. Christian Haynes is another one, a little undersized at guard. I think he's like 6'2" something, but played really well for Connecticut. I did not get to watch a lot of film on because I found it very hard to find it online, so I'm excited to finally get to see him in person, get to learn a little bit about him, and not have to worry about trying to find film online because it was hard to find that team. He's definitely a name to watch. Patrick Paul, I think, is another really good tackle out of this. He came in a lot bigger than expected, which I love to see. So I'm very much going to be watching Patrick Paul close because one of my issues with him was he was a little lean. And he came in, I think, going from 315 to like 328. So I want to see how he plays with that. Maybe he has a little more of an impact in the run game. That's my concern with him and why I wouldn't draft him right now is because, like we talked about in the lessons learned episode that we did last time, we want to bring in players on the offensive line that can both pass block and run block. Because if you don't do that and you get a guy who only pass blocks, you got the hard decision of deciding, well, do we risk giving up a guy who's not allowing sacks, but try to go get someone who can actually create opportunities in the run game? You have to, but you're getting rid of players that it's hard to say no to them. So Patrick Paul is on that list for me right now. I would love to see him be a good run blocker at the Senior Bowl. I don't know what kind of drills he'll do for that. Probably more so during the actual game. If he participates, he'll be someone I'm watching very close. And the final guy for me here, Cedric Van Pran. Really good center. Georgia, smart player. For him, I think that he would be a great center to bring into this team. He's probably not your top option, but he's a very good consolation prize. Around the third round. Not that he's a bad player or anything, but I think you got better opportunities out there you'd love to get in on. But Cedric Van Pran, still a very good center. I would like to see him bulk up a little bit. I'm not sure if we got something from him at the Senior Bowl for measurements. I will actually check that on the fly here. We did not. I'll have to look at that. He should have weighed in, but we'll see. If he's bulked up a little bit, he'll definitely go up my board. So let's hop in defensive lineman, and we'll go to the secondary players. So Eboigbe, haven't watched a lot on him, but I saw him kind of come out of nowhere. The stats look good. Definitely going to watch him. Same with Braden Fisk, not watched him a lot. Two players I'm going to have to get very familiar with at the Senior Bowl. Same with McKinley Jackson. Byron Murphy will definitely be someone I might have a different perspective on at the end of this because a lot of people are ranking him a lot higher than where he is right now. on my board. So might be some reasons to move him up at the end of this. We will see. Darius Robinson, one of my most exciting players to watch for the Senior Bowl. He has great size. I think he's got a huge ceiling in the NFL, and to me, he kind of reminds me, as far as how I think his trajectory will go, of similar to like Will McDonald. But I just don't think you're going to have the team at like 13 that's going to go pick him. I think you're going to get a team. It might have been 15. It was somewhere around there, like in the teens. But I think he's going to get really close to the first round, end up going off the board early in the second, just for the potential. Because the NFL, it's a what can you do for me now, not what did you do for me before. And if they think he's going to be a better player in the NFL than another guy who may have outperformed in college, then he's absolutely going to be the pick. So, very much a guy I'm watching. And then Tavondre Sweat's the last one. For me, I watched more of Sweat. I'm not huge on his game. I think he's just too big to play defensive tackle and have the impact you want. And even for the strength he has, I don't think it was exactly what I expected for that size. I might be crazy, but that's what I found in the film I watched. So I'll still monitor him. Maybe I missed something there, but that's kind of where I feel on Sweat right now. And then you get to the defensive backs. Oh, hold up. Okay. Linebackers got a couple guys that I want to note. Chris Braswell. He's being listed as an outside linebacker. I will put him in defensive line. Obviously, he could probably come back and do coverage a little bit at OLB. But Braswell, really exciting name. Someone who's not talked about a lot because of the other guy at his position on the team, Dallas Turner. Kind of similar to how Terrion Arnold wasn't talked about a lot because of Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now he's come out of nowhere. Chris Braswell has a ton of potential. I think if he came back to college, he would be a bona fide first next year. He's going to be a really good pick for a team that takes him. Might be a great investment in the second round for Jacksonville. So very much like Braswell's game. And then James Williams. There's talk about him going to linebacker just because he's a really big guy. I think he's like 230 or so. So safety, he's pretty big for that. But he's someone who is a really good prospect coming into college. Maybe didn't perform as expected, but there's still a lot there to work with. And so now we'll hop into defensive backs. Got a few guys to note here. Chris Abrams-Drain. I think this guy would be the perfect fit in the slot if he was doing well against the run. That is my primary concern with him and why I'm not as big as I was originally on him, because you have to be able to defend the run better if you're playing in the slot. And I don't think he does that. But this could be a guy who could kick outside, be a really nice backup for you there, even come in and start a little bit if necessary. I think he's a really good player, but it's the size concerns because he is generally a very undersized player. Kalen Carson will be another guy to watch that I have not done a lot of research on recently. I did my initial evaluation. I have not got back to him on my second round through the players. Same with DJ James there, Nehemiah Pritchett. And then I would throw out as a couple last names, Javon Bullard, Cameron Kinchins, two top safety prospects from this class. I think could be really good players in the draft, although I do not think they'll be targets for Jacksonville because the way I see it, Antonio Johnson's your strong safety going forward. You don't really have huge needs back there because Andrew Wingard can kick in and start at either position if necessary if you have an injury. So I feel good about strong safety right now and free safety. So probably not going to watch them too close, but two very good players in this group of guys. So those are the rosters. I will give you guys input on what I see there, hoping to put out maybe a short after each practice session. We'll see on that. We'll at least have content coming out on the channel, so make sure to follow. I'll try to put out clips on Twitter as well of the players, especially ones to watch for Jacksonville. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate your time. And finally, go Jags.